Hello lovely people, my name is Emma, welcome to my channel and welcome if you are new. Today I am going to take you through a few screen acting basics. If you're familiar with some of these things, if you're familiar with acting for screen or just being on screen in some performing way, they might sound quite basic, but it's stuff that I find very helpful for me to remember and things that can often be missed, especially when people are transitioning from stage to screen. So hopefully this will be helpful. I'm gonna use some examples from the film 2025. If you haven't seen my recap and review of this film on my main channel, I will just throw this disclaimer out there. This film was made by independent filmmakers. It was no budget. The actors in this are not professional actors. They have not been trained, and therefore, while their performances can as a result be very funny, we shouldn't be too hard on them because they're not trained professionals. Making a film of any kind during the pandemic with a small crew and very, very low budget is an achievement. So I'm going to be pointing out lots of things that they were doing wrong. The reason being to help us not make the same mistakes because they're easy to make, so don't be too hard on them, that's what I'm saying. This is going to involve a little bit of homework. There's learning, there's practice, there's research involved in knowing screen craft. If you've ever studied film, TV in any way, you'll probably have a big advantage because knowing things like shot types, I'll get into this in a minute, but knowing things like shot types, knowing just the language of the film set is a huge advantage because you want to know what you're supposed to be doing, in what context you're being filmed. And I think this might be where a lot of people slip up. A lot of actors will be very proactive in their acting training. Many of those people can move you to tears on a stage or in person and then look extremely amateurish on camera just because they haven't learned a lot of the technical basics. So the very first bit of advice I'm going to give you, the very first thing I'm going to say to do, and a lot of beginners hate this, and when I was, many years ago, because I've been doing this camera thing for a while now, but many years ago, I absolutely hated listening to the sound of my own voice or watching myself back. You have to get over that, because you need to see what you're doing to see what you're doing wrong and how to improve, and also to see what you're doing right. Sometimes your face will do something that is just, oh, I didn't know that that's what I did when I feel that emotion, that works so well. You have to watch yourself back. I'm sorry. So stick the camera on, use your phone, whatever, it doesn't matter. Stick the camera on, get yourself a nice sort of mid-shot. You don't want to be too close for this particular exercise, and just film yourself. You can read a little monologue, a couple of lines from a script, you can just ad-lib, just chat, you can just read directly from Wikipedia, it doesn't matter. Just keep going until you feel that you are performing naturally as you would want to be. So you're not like still initially stiff from not being used to the camera until you've loosened up a bit, and then stop and watch it back. And then notice what you're doing with your body. Here's an example from me. The first time I recorded myself in a screen acting class, or the first time the class, the teacher recorded me, I was doing this. And I had no idea that I did this. It turns out I have a lot of movement. On my main channel, I gesticulate a lot. You'll know that if you watch stuff over there. I move around, I gesticulate. It's a nightmare on live shows. They spend all this time lining me up in a template, and then I'm like, yeah, woo, moving around like a crazy bean. So I looked like I was at sea in a little rowing boat, and I had no idea why I looked like that. I'm not conscious of that particular movement, or I wasn't until I saw that that's what I did. Everybody has these little tiny tics. Some of us might lean more on a right leg than a left, depending on, you might have one stronger knee than the other, you might have a little bit of a tic. For example, in 2025, this chap jiggles his leg a lot, and there's another problem with this that we'll highlight in a little bit. But so that's the sort of thing that's very natural. Lots of people jiggle their legs. You have to identify those things to be able to stop them. Because everything looks, if you jiggle your leg a little bit, or you're swaying slightly from side to side, on a stage, people are far enough away that they probably won't notice. And so nobody's going to comment on it, you're not going to learn that that's something that you do. On a camera, when you're close up, I mean, if I'm in, and this is gonna be a little bit creepy, if I'm in this and I'm doing that same movement, how much bigger does it look when I'm this close to the camera? I look like an Animal Crossing character. It looks silly, it doesn't look natural. Filming yourself, learning the weirdness of your body, you've got to just spend a lot of time recording yourself and looking in the mirror whenever you've got any scene to practice, if you've got an audition, just film yourself. Just film yourself, watch it back, see what happens. This is the most important and valuable thing you can do, is just to keep recording yourself. It can be scary at first, you just have to power through and you will get used to it. If it helps, you can act like you're reviewing a friend's scene. And likewise, you can get a friend to review your work. You can film each other. And then that gives you this, gives you practice in, being an impartial observer until you can apply that to yourself comfortably. So the other, I'll just sip and then I'll start talking, shall I? That'd be smarter. How to be on screen. I've mentioned a couple of shot names already. The next thing you need to do, and it's a bit boring because there are a million of them, you've got to learn your shot sizes. You've got to learn your shot names. You need to learn basically all the language that you will find on set, and there are tons of online resources. You can go onto educational sites for students studying film studies, and you can find just print off a list, learn it. You just want to know the sizes of your shots. You want to know what a wide is. You want to know what a mid shot is. You want to know what a close-up, an extreme close-up, etc. It's very important, and we could do a 40-minute video just on that. So I'm going to let you go and do that in your own time, but it's so important that you know what size shot you're in, that you know where the camera is at you. You need to know what a drone shot looks like and where it's going. You need to be able to, a lot of the time you won't be told these things on set, so you need to be able to hear, okay, next we're doing this size shot, so I now can prepare knowing what I'm going to look like in the shot. So it's a bit boring, it might ruin watching films for you for a little bit until you get used to it, learning the technical side of film and TV production. It's worth it. Just knowing your placement, things like that on set, so valuable. The next thing that can be very different for somebody who has a lot of stage experience is the way you not just interact with props, but the way you move yourself. Part of what you learn through training your acting is how to be in the moment, how to be in the character, in the space, and act naturally as it comes. This is where this kind of screen work can be a bit challenging for some people, because you need that. You must be in the moment, reacting naturally to the things happening in the scene. At the same time, if you put your arm up here on a sofa, as I did in a scene I did a while ago, you need to know exactly when you did that, because when the camera moves and you're doing a new shot at a different angle of the same scene, you need to do this at exactly the same point, in exactly the same way, and make it feel natural. It's a very challenging thing to get used to anytime you interact with a prop. And this is something that if you do screen acting training with teachers, they'll really drill this into you, right? You'll get a lot of, you'll be challenged to do a lot of things during a scene. I know friends who have done a masterclass recently describe being tasked with performing this scene whilst having a challenge such as move 3 cups, answer the phone at this point, do this and that. You kind of have to drill that in because you have to be able to repeat your actions precisely. Here's an example of a scene that stood out to me in my 2025 review. This chap has these fabulous movements, maybe a little over the top, for screen and the character he wants to play. He's doing this with his arms. His arms are constantly up and down, but when we change the camera angle, he's doing this often twice in a row in a way that a human being wouldn't naturally do. So we understand that's as a viewer, often viewers don't fully understand what is wrong when they're looking at something. It's just something clicks in your brain that goes, that's not real. So we are going, whoa, something's wrong there, and it's because there's this repeated action, because he's not memorized the exact point that he does these movements. They're very natural in the moment, which is almost what you want for a first take if you're able to then memorize. It depends on your ability to quickly memorize things like that. So he's not memorized the exact points where he does certain movements, so we get these repetitions, we get cuts where the continuity doesn't work and it takes us completely out of the moment and out of his performance. So this is a very difficult thing to learn for many people. Some people are phenomenal and can just do stuff off the bat, so if you're like that, then congratulations, but I recommend for most people to practice as much as possible. Again, film yourself, film yourself doing a scene, give yourself exaggerated tasks. It doesn't matter, nobody's going to see these things except for you, so you can do silly over-the-top things. You can do, I'm going to scratch my head, scratch my bum, do a jumping jack, you know, whatever it takes to learn to apply these points to parts in the scene and find a way to make it natural. There's not a science to it, you just have to practice a lot. It can be hard. On knowing your shots then, let's look at a quick clip from 2025. Do you notice anything particularly eye-catching here? Does something jump out to you as wrong in this scene? If not, then have a look at me now and let me know where your eye is drawn. Is your eye on my face? Are you watching for my feelings? Are you watching my lips for what I'm saying? Are you watching my face? Or are you completely distracted by what's going on down here? Know your shot size so that you can keep action away from the edges. Very, very common mistake, one that I have made countless times, and that it's hard to pick up on again because you're trying to move in a naturalistic way. You need to know where the edge of frame is so you can keep action away from here. You do not want your hands doing some strange movement at the bottom of frame because the eye is drawn to your hands doing a weird little wibbly thing. And you don't want people to be looking at your hands, you want them to be looking at your face. Likewise, if we're in, this would be a very bizarre shot, but if there's something going on and the camera is here, for example, and I'm like constantly scratching my shoulder, there's a gentleman in 2025 who scratches his leg by the edge of frame very often, and I don't believe it relates to his character, at least it's not the choice that I would make. If I'm here, scratching my arm, rubbing my arm this whole time, we're just filling the corner frame with movement that is drawing the eye. So you've got to learn your frame edges and make sure you're not doing anything. Mostly it's a hands issue. Often I find my weakness with this is if I'm holding a cup. And I'm holding a cup naturally at the edge of frame and then just my fingers are moving and people are watching to see if I'm spilling my cup. Nobody's looking at my face anymore. Here's one that again seems kind of obvious and yet it comes up so often. What is wrong in this shot? Or at least for a viewer, what is distracting? What takes you out of the moment? Here's a little hint. Putting your hand in front of your face, in front of you in any way, but chiefly the face, is just a terrible mistake. And if you want to look at it from a vain perspective, vanity, true vanity, is the death of the actor. But if you want to pretend that it's, you know, an ego thing just to help you learn, you want your face to be seen, so you don't want to cover it. It's as simple as that. There are many ways in which small movements, small natural movements can be very helpful. If you're anxious in a scene, you might want to rub the back of your neck. You want to do what I'm doing here. You always want to be behind the head, and this is where there's a lot more cheating often involved in, well, there's a cheating of a different nature, because there's a lot of cheating in stage as well, but there's a lot of cheating in screen because it's a camera, and it's in a specific place, and we can make something look real because the camera can't see 360 degrees all around us. So it might feel a bit weird to always be, if you're ever touching your head, to be doing it back here, but it looks much better on the camera than doing this, or just like bothering your face in front of the screen. In 2025, there are so many instances, again, this poor chap, he's not a trained actor, it's not his fault, we're not bullying him. He's the biggest culprit of this. He will constantly be doing this. And that, it's confusing for us, because even though we're listening, even if we're not hard of hearing in any way, a lot of the time we do rely on lip reading. So it's distracting because you can't see the mouth and something seems kind of off there. Secondly, depending on your microphone setup, you can be completely muffling your voice. The microphone setup I have now is probably making me sound a lot more muffled when I do this versus having my face clear. You can get away with it slightly more if you're using lavalier mics, little clip-on mics on your clothes and your costume, as opposed to a boom mic that comes facing you in the scene. Still don't do it. It doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good, it's gonna make you look a little bit amateurish on set if you're doing things like covering your face. Even though it might feel natural, you have to learn, and this is again the great benefit of filming yourself, learn what you do naturally. So okay, I naturally do this when I'm like thinking of an answer to a question. Just take that and cheat it for the camera. Put it over here instead, somewhere where the action comes across, but you're not covering your face. You're still performing, you're still doing these natural actions, you're just cheating it a little bit so that it doesn't come across silly or confusing or distracting on camera. That's all it is. This is a slightly out there one, but just because it's in 2025, it made me think of it. I thought I'd recommend this as an example of things to learn. There is a shot in 2025 where this character wakes up suddenly at a sound, and it is the most unnatural looking thing you've ever seen. When I was a student, for some reason, I did like 3 student films in a row where I was asleep at the start of it and had to wake up, and they look awful. I would struggle to watch them now. I'd be watching through like my fingers because my god, it's terrible. Physiological things like waking up, being cold, having a headache, anything like that. If you don't know what that is really like to experience, you can't play it on camera. You can't. It's going to look silly. Little 18-year-old Emma doing these student films, I sort of lie there thinking, oh god, okay, so action, and then I'm going to count for 3, and then I'm going to wake up. Oh, I'm awake now. Looked shit. It looked terrible because I didn't know how to be asleep. And obviously, the most realistic way of being asleep would be if they gave you an hour at the start of the shot to actually fall asleep, and then they woke you up. That's not going to happen. And then you would be a bit delirious as you tried to get into the scene. So you have to learn what, again, this is just an example, but what are the physical aspects of being asleep? How do you distract your brain in the way that is, and for me, learning to do this helped me sleep in real life, so it has its benefits outside of just being on screen. What are the sensations? What are the things that happen? For example, when you sleep, when we first close our eyes, we tend to be looking down. Your eyes naturally will face forwards through your eyelids when you're asleep, so that helps. And then focusing on a part of your body, focusing on something completely abstract, unrelated to the scene, just to make yourself physically relaxed. And then you play into the scene, then you start the process of waking up and whatever thoughts might be around that. Am I late? Do I have an appointment? What's going on? And then you wake up, you have your objective, you move into the scene. That's just sleeping, right? And then, like I say, you've got being cold, being hot, being itchy. What naturally happens to you in those moments? So just when you're walking around in your daily life, try and pick up on all of these sensations. You want to file that information away for later usage. I have noticed, for example, that when I feel hot or cold, and it might be the length of my hair, but I tend to feel it in the neck at first, the very back of the neck. So if I focus that sensation on the back of the neck, and then I know that because it starts up there, my shoulders will start to stiffen a little bit, and I can very quickly convince myself, and now I am cold, that I'm cold. The key with this, and again, we could do 2 hours on just this alone, so I'm just kind of throwing lots of stuff at the wall in the hopes that some of it will stick, and whatever interests you or whatever you feel comfortable with, you can try straight away. Don't feel overwhelmed by all the stuff that I'm yelling. This is to help me too, because nothing helps you learn like teaching. The important thing not to forget when you're doing that, so if you try and throw yourself into feeling sick or having a headache or being really, really cold, you have to also be aware enough of the sensations in the opposite to turn that off. Because otherwise you're going to give yourself a headache and not be able to get rid of it, and then you're screwed for the rest of your performance, right? So you have to be aware of the sensation of, in this example, warming up again, where that comes in, the natural feeling of relaxation, ceasing shivering. It's complicated to explain because it's all sensations in the body that you have to learn and understand and practice, but you can do it. It's just a matter of practice. Because these things, all of these things, where you put your hands, memorizing the actions that you do at what points in a scene, learning how to wake up physically, because these are all very technical, sort of less interesting. If we're being honest, it's not as interesting as learning to act, learning to embody a character and explore a scene. It's not that interesting, so people don't do it as much. If you can go on set and understand all the language of set and know not to cover your face, not to bother the edges of the screen. If crew comes up to you on set and says, I noticed you moved your arm, do you know at what point you moved your arm? And you can say, yes, I've got it, don't worry, I'll do it every take. People will love working with you. You'll instantly be so much more a favourite, regardless of your acting ability, even if you feel like, oh, you know, I'm not exactly Martin Clunes or whatever, George Clooney. I don't know why I said Martin Clunes, it's just an example. I'm not exactly George Clooney. I'm, you know, nervous about being on set. Being able to just tick all those boxes of the basics so that directors don't have to babysit you, so that you're not, you know, you're not given an AD to babysit you, so that you can very quickly say to someone, sorry, what shot are we doing next? So that you know exactly how big to make your performance, where the edges of frame are. You will just be so much more loved. It is a huge learning curve. And again, so much of it is just watching yourself, practicing, watching yourself. You need a full-length mirror, you need a camera. Just look at yourself doing it over and over again. Do the same scene to death. Don't even do a scene, just have a conversation with yourself. Anything, just figure out, what does this all do? What does this do? How does it look on camera? What is my eye drawn to when I'm on camera? Am I at C? Am I leaning like this? There's so much you can do with so little. The other reason that it is so good to do this as much as possible in your own time, to film yourself, to look at yourself in the mirror, is because it can be difficult and distracting when you are first learning this stuff. You will probably find that your acting goes out the window because you'll be so focused on your eye line, for example. Never look directly down the camera lens. Unless your director is doing some avant-garde thing, if they say to look down the lens, look slightly above or slightly below. That's just a bonus tip because there's so much that we could cover in this video. So if you're thinking really hard about your eye line, how much you blink. Oh, watch out for that when you film yourself. We blink way more than we think, but you have to know how much you blink. Again, it's the same as moving your hands, continuity. If you blink super often and you don't register when you blink, then if you cut to a different shot, suddenly it looks like you've got something in your eye. Anyway, there's so much to cover that stuff just keeps coming in. So yes, when you're filming yourself, you can get so distracted thinking about, hold on, how many times have I blinked? And I'm doing this, and am I too still now? Do I need to be a bit more natural? Am I doing something near the edge of frame? And then suddenly your monologue's over and you haven't thought about your character at all because you've been 100% focused on the technical stuff, which is completely fine when you're learning this. It has to become second nature to be more beneficial. So if you let it become second nature, filming yourself in your bedroom at home, that is so much better than losing track of your character on set or in an audition. I hope that wasn't too all over the place and overwhelming for you. There is really so much we could talk about here, and maybe I'll do another one if people enjoyed this. Main things, main homework, film yourself, film yourself, film yourself. If you struggle to watch it back at first, have a friend do it, film each other, learn some film language, learn shot sizes, learn camera moves, understand until you can hear a shot name or a camera move and know exactly where that's going to be in relation to you and what size frame you have to work with, etc. You'll learn so much just by watching yourself, I promise. I know a lot of people find it very stressful to start with. It will be worth it and you will get over it, and that will give you more confidence as well. You want to get over your nerves at both being on camera and remembering the technical problems before you're stood in front of a casting director. It just makes sense to get that out of the way in the comfort of your own home, with you and a friend who can laugh at each other and then fix it. You know? I hope this was interesting and or helpful for some people. I find this stuff super fascinating. I think screen acting is such a fascinating discipline because it requires you to know and learn so much outside of just acting. Acting itself is a skill you should never stop training, and yet there is so much more. Do let me know your thoughts down below. If you have any, look at me, I'm hanging out at the edge of frame. If you have any basic tips, any simple things that tripped you up, anything that you think is just a great piece of advice, please drop that down below. For me and for other people, it's so useful to sharing your knowledge, explaining the places in which you have buggered up, things that trip you up. Sometimes it feels like it can be embarrassing. I don't want everyone necessarily to know that I naturally look like I'm in the deep ocean at sea, but on the off chance that somebody viewing also looks like they're at sea, it might make them feel a bit better and know that it's just a technical thing to overcome. So do leave that information down below. We went over a whole load of different things, so if there's anything specific either within this video or something you have questions about that you'd like me to cover, just let me know. And of course, if you did enjoy this video, consider giving it a like, maybe subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Most importantly, and I always say this, but I mean it especially today, because actors and creatives in general are notoriously hard on themselves. Have yourselves a lovely week. Treat yourself with some kindness. If you record yourself and it looks like a complete disaster because it's the first time you've done it, that is normal, I promise, okay? And what you're doing, by looking at that and identifying the things that you're doing, you are already in a better position than a lot of other people who don't bother because they don't want to, they're scared, they're lazy. Sometimes actors be lazy, so know that just even by being here, you're working on something, you're doing a great job. Try not to be too self-conscious or too hard on yourself. And with that, I shall say goodbye and I will see you very soon.